What we're going to do, Abby, is just walk you through your distant memory from some of your earliest work that sort of walked the line of thrillers right up through to River. And we're going to start with My Fragile Heart from 2000, and then we're going to also show a clip from Murder from 2002. So I don't know if you want to speak a little bit about what those were about, or you haven't.
Yeah, well, Fragile Heart was actually my first original drama, and I went into a room when I sold this show. I went into a room and I had no idea. I literally didn't have an idea. And they said, we are looking for shows about community. And I said, that's really strange, I've got a show about community. And they said, preferably about friends. And I went, it's about friends, that's so weird. And they said, but obviously it needs some kind of engine, some kind of thriller. I went, it's weird, it's a thriller. And by the end of that meeting, I'd come up with My Fragile Heart. And really, My Fragile Heart is a kind of nod to the place I came from or lived in for a while, which is Stoke-on-Trent. And at the time, I'd thought I really need a really simple organising principle, which is it's about lives going down the pan, so I'll set it in a toilet factory. And so it was as basic as that. This was obviously on a pinboard somewhere in that meeting that I saw. But so it's about a woman who goes back to her hometown and reconnects with a community who all their lives have changed and moved and evolved over the years, and it's about her reconnecting with a man she knew at school and who she comes to realise has the kind of answer to the death of a friend that she knew when she was a child, and so that's the sort of starting point for the show.
And can you tell us a little bit about the genesis of Murder? This is another interesting frame.
Yeah, I mean, Murder really came about because I was very interested in looking at the time. I mean, it's been done again and again, but at the time I wanted to try and look at the perspective of murder from different points of view. And so this is really about a woman. The central character, played by Julia Walters, is a woman who suddenly is hit by the violent murder of her son, and it's seen through the perspective of four people, including herself. So it's seen through the perspective of a local newsagent who knows her and knows the boy. It's seen through the perspective of a journalist, and then finally through a witness who you discover is the murderer. So and so that's really how this evolved, and it really evolved out of my meetings with lots of different people really who had experienced loss in a kind of violent and aggressive way. And one of the women I met, who was extraordinary, had lost her son very, very suddenly in an attack in a street, and a teenage boy. And I was just blown away by how 5 years on, how together this woman was and how fantastic she looked and how beautifully kept she was and what lovely company she was. And then just as we were leaving the room, someone made a joke, and it wasn't a particularly good joke, but we laughed politely. But she didn't stop laughing. And I looked at her and I realised she'd gone mad. And it was only in that moment I thought, yes, of course, if you had lost your child, you'd go mad. And so I wanted to write about how do you deal with the insanity of such a violent death. So that was the starting point for Murder.
It's so dated. It looks so dated.
To me. Well, I find it incredibly moving still, interestingly. And I think, I was wondering why, and I thought there is something about what you can do with a heightened genre like thriller, where you have two immense actors like Imelda Staunton and Julie Walters. Earlier we had Morven Christie and Vicky McClure. That there is something about what happens when you put two people like that in close proximity. Is there something about the kind of trope of the thriller that do you think you're drawn to for that reason?
I mean, I think early on when I was doing, female-centric work, which is, effectively what I've always been drawn to doing, then the thriller was a way of getting those actresses through. And so if I said it was a thriller, and I said this, and I put them at the heart, somehow I think commissioners assumed that it had a muscularity to it and it was okay. And so, but also, I mean, thrillers, as we know, they're an engine, and, just the sheer effort it takes to write. We all talk about writing. I'm the worst offender of that, but actually you have to sit down and do it. And so a thriller is just another way of keeping yourself excited and informed, and it's constantly, you're playing with the what happens next. And so, as an engine for any drama, it's really compelling, and it has, huge muscular roles, because normally you're dealing with good and evil, and you're dealing with, complexity of obviously of emotion, but also You're dealing with people who are really, trying to traverse very, very extreme and difficult situations. And so I think it magnetizes you to bring together. You need a lot of resistance. So it demands that you do, create ensembles. And there are ensembles in thrillers often, and that's what I really enjoy writing, and what I'm a real advocate for, specifically in female centric work, because I think it's a way of building brand, because it's a way of going, great, I can cast 5 women, brilliant, great, okay, so we can have a third and a fourth secondary character who, if we give her a great moment, she may get up to the lead, in the next show. And so I'm very practical about it.
That's interesting, because both of these start very similarly, where they start with there's almost like both of them have a huge tracking shot, so that you're almost going through this community, or in the murder's case, through one family, and you meet everybody in the first, 3 or 4 minutes in the same thing. So that's very purposeful, is it? That kind of...
Yeah, it is. And also I think it's, when I first started out, that's where I was coming from. I was writing about communities I lived in. I grew up in a very working class community, and I wanted to write about that, and I wanted to write about how hard that is to live in that when you don't quite fit. And so that was also, there was something unsettling. Those were very unsettling places for me. There were often, there was a lot of economic disparity, which in itself created and had repercussions that often had violent ends. And so there were lots of things that it was a real seedbed for me.
Yes. Well, I'm from Leicester, so I was really, when I was watching Murder, I was like, oh, it's so nice to hear that kind of like Midlands, North East Midlands, which you don't often hear, right? Yeah. It's not a kind of region really of the world.
Yeah, and it's a very particular area, Yeah. And it was funny when we shot, the thing that was a real kick when we did Fragile Heart was I went back and there was 2 or 3 of the people on the set were from my old school. And that was amazing. And I was like, God, I love that. I love that this can be something that employs people, employs me, employs you, because that's really at the heart of everything I do as well, is that it is my job, and it is something, I think because I come from actors, it's really important that you create work with it. So, yeah.
And also, I think in these 2 works, you're beginning to see some recurring themes, I think, around often we're dealing with the aftermath of something. Yeah. And we're dealing with people with the idea of guilt and kind of, not necessarily retribution, but resolution, and the way people are trying to find that. Is that the kind of part of the dramatic narrative that you find?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing about thrillers is, inherently, it's filled with tropes that you're constantly fighting, and sometimes they work in your favour. But they're also you're steering people towards hopefully some kind of resolution, and so and because I often set those in very domestic situations, then they work in a very sort of myopic way. They do deal with fallible human beings at the centre of it. So one of the things that was interesting about Fragile Heart for me, and it's funny talking about work that is like 15 years old, so it feels like a long time ago now, but is that I read I was reading a lot, and I met subsequently a number of men who had either had been imprisoned for paedophilia, and the thing that was interesting was I thought I'd read an article which said you let someone off the hook if you make them into a monster. And actually you have to create that complexity, because then they are properly colluding with what they've done. Whereas I think if you just write somebody off as a psychopath, then there is there's no moral ambiguity there. It's just somebody who is psychopathically set to do something. And so that's why it was very important for me to create, to go into the emotional heart of all of those. And that's why, Murder, you eventually go into the heart of the murderer, And the thing about that, anybody's ever seen Murder, but I think I made a mistake. What's the great privilege of doing work and seeing over time is you see your mistakes. And I made a mistake with that, because I created it as a random killing, and actually I think it would have been more interesting if I hadn't. So you're constantly looking.
Yeah, that's something. When did you realise that? Did you realise that kind of soon after, or is that something that came later?
But also I've seen it. I've watched a couple of thrillers recently, and not so long, that have done the same thing, and I've realised that was a mistake.
Right.
It's a bit, you let something off the hook a bit.
Right.
Because I think you make a deal with an audience with thriller, you have to pay it off. There's nothing more frustrating when you go, God, that was really, you want people to feel completely held and to feel like you've properly taken them on a journey, and it's been worth it. The trauma's been worth it.
So that's what's really hard about them, I think, is that you've got to resolve a lot of things, haven't you? You've got to resolve the storyline, the plot line, you've got to resolve your characters, you've got to resolve it for us. I mean, how do you...
But I don't think it differs from any other piece of drama, to be honest, because that's what you're doing if you're doing a historical drama. That's what you're doing if you're doing a love story. You're basically trying to surprise and excite and, throw a different perspective on a group of characters who may have some kind of conflict at some point and may go to quite dark places, and actually you do that with I've done that in every drama I would say Shame has a thriller element, or and I don't even look at those things. I don't set out to write thrillers. Right. I just write something that is for me is compelling and that I'm genuinely curious about, and so that automatically is and crime genre in some form as well when you're starting out is what everybody wants. Right. I mean, it's what everybody wants, that's the truth.
Right. Why do you think that is? Why does everybody want that?
I think because we're all scared of the dark, and so if we communally sit together and watch this together, then maybe the world won't seem so scary. If we're like, give me my pain now because I know it's out there, let's do it, let's watch this together, wow, we got through it, they survived. Right. I think it's that. I think that it's odd, isn't it, because I'm waiting for the kind of La La Land moment where we all go, I'm done with that. I just want joy. I want, particularly where we're living now, where...
I don't think this lot are going
No. I mean...
They're all here, yeah.
Stone gets murdered at the end. But I think it's that it's a way of exploring our own fears, and ultimately there's something very reassuring about a good there's something incredibly reassuring about a good thriller, because you take the world apart and then by the end you put it back together. It may not be back together in quite the same way, but you do put it back together.
Yes. It's catharsis. So the next clip we're going to see is Sex Traffic, which obviously, going back to the fact that you don't set out to write a thriller, it'd be interesting to hear about.
Well, again, it comes back. I mean, I think Sex Traffic really started to represent an evolution for me when you first write, you don't. I mean, I think we're in a different age, because I was pre-Google and the internet. It was just happening for me when I was writing, and. So you write from your own space, and so murder was when I started to meet murder. Other people outside. I went to meet, people who had committed violent crime, people who'd experienced violent crime, and then from that I kind of thought, well, this is incredible, isn't it? Because my own world is very narrow, and I want to start to look at other environments. And so Sex Traffic came out of being approached by the BBC, who said, we've got this incredible body of research that we've started. Would you like to have a look at it? And from that, it was post the fall of the wall. It was the East had opened up, and there was this sort of new incredible movement across the Europe, and out of that was coming the commerce of sex trafficking. And I had just had my son. Is that right? Yeah, I just had my son when I started writing this, and then I just had my daughter when we were filming it. And they're 2 years apart, and my son's now 16. So, and I remember thinking, God, this is such extraordinary, compelling material, and it came out this particular story, which is at the centre of Sex Traffic. It's about two sisters who believe that they are going to go, who live in Moldova, and they believe that they are going to go to Italy for waitressing jobs. The boyfriend of one of the sisters has got them some jobs, and as soon as they leave, it becomes very apparent that that is not what's going to happen. And it came out of a tiny little bit of police footage that I saw of two sisters being interviewed about being trafficked. And one of the sisters, they were about 15, 16, these girls, very young. One of the sisters kept on getting up and going out to answer her phone and going out to answer her phone. And what you slowly became aware of was that the person who had trafficked her and who they were now reporting to the police was calling her. And what I discovered about that story is that a few weeks after that interview, the girl who'd been trafficked, these sisters had been trafficked together, one of the sisters was re-trafficked, and her sister, in order to find her sister, got herself re-trafficked again and went and searched for her. And so this is what Sex Traffic is about. It's about two sisters, one they get separated, and one sister gets herself re-trafficked to try and find the other. And that was the starting point.
The research element to your work is is pretty central, isn't it?
Yeah.
So how do you...
I think it's central to most writers' work, actually. I don't think it's sort of... I like the way you say it, like it's a kind of unique thing to me, but it really
but
isn't.
I mean, I think you're going into places that are, I mean, so far anyway, if we're thinking about paedophilia, people who've lost their children, sex traffic, these are...
Well, I mean, I guess, when I just said about thrillers, they're the stories you tell yourself to try and work out your own fears and your own genuine concerns, and somehow you tell yourself a story that you can control and find a resolution to. And probably, part of my desire to write them is that, it's a desire to understand, and you do, that's the incredible thing about being a writer, is that your job is to go out and explore the world and then try and translate and create story and narrative that is going to be entertaining as well as, you hope, compelling and insightful in some way. And so the research is absolutely at the heart, because actually my own life is very simple, and it's other people's lives that are fascinating, and it's other people's worlds that I'm interested in, and I may reflect back in some primal way, but this particular story is incredibly important, and I don't think I realised how it was, and I still think it was that I just had a baby, that I was very open to something. I was just probably just so knackered actually, that I was just sort of just consuming, and I'm terrified I wouldn't get back to writing. And so the stories really went in, and the girls that I met, the young women I met, were so it was so profound. And I live quite near Finsbury Park in North London, and suddenly I was getting on the bus in North London and driving past all these grimy shop windows and looking at the flats above, and I thought, I know the girls that live there now, and I know the local butcher who goes to you, and I know and I had an amazing story of one young woman who, through a brilliant project, I won't name it, but through a brilliant project that rehouses people, she'd found a place to live, and she was about to start college, and she'd been trafficked from Eastern Europe, and there are transit countries and there are source countries, and London is where everyone wants to come to, and she'd finally found her way to London and had managed to break herself free, and she was starting at a London college to start a course, and she went in and sat down, and her lecturer came in, and he was one of the men who regularly visited her at the brothel in Enfield, where she'd been brought in from. And so suddenly I thought, these stories are really bloody important, because I want to write that story, and I want the wife of that lecturer to be watching this and going, this is great, we should watch this. And I want to see him go through the agony and the pain of realising what he's done. So that's really the motivation for me most of the time, and it's the privilege of what you do, really, is that, I basically write. I mean, I feel writing for me is a conversation, and I feel really, really lucky I'm able to have the conversation.
Right.
That's what I'm trying to do, really.
Right.
And it sounds a bit worthy, but it is just genuinely what I feel.
Yeah. A thriller is indeed the genre of our time. So we're going to come to the next clip, which isn't actually labelled as a thriller, or is it? Is The Hour?
Yeah, I mean,
How do you feel about it?
The Hour was interesting. There's a man striding to the front. The Hour is interesting because... thriller moment, eh?
It's true.
Who knows what else is on this?
I get shot or
5
something.
minutes time, I'm going to drop down dead.
Yeah, exactly.
And when I wink at you. What the hell was I talking about?
I can't remember.
Interesting.
The Hour.
Oh, The Hour.
The Hour.
Brilliant show. Got cancelled after the second
Brilliant
series. Why
show.
we ask
Should not
ourselves?
have got cancelled.
The Hour really came about from working with a brilliant producer who I work with again and again called Jane Featherstone, and she said to me, wouldn't it be great to do something about the Suez Canal? And I am deeply uneducated, and I was like, no. How else could we tell that story? And so that was the starting point. And she said, let's do something in the BBC. And it was when I started to look at the BBC, I thought this was amazing. And suddenly you had this kind of film noir world. And so actually, The Hour did, I mean, series one, I mean, both of them actually, they did have a thriller. I mean, it opens with the murder of a man who you discover is a spy, so it was a kind of spy story, but really it was about the sort of traumatised newsmen and women who had come back from the Second World War for me, and it was about,
London at that time. And the wonderful thing about that, for me doing that era and why I love period drama actually, is that it's all about there. As we know, there's no technology. You can go. You can't ring people up instantly. There is slow burn, and actually also there's incredible sexual tension. Because people don't just say what they want all the time, and so that was very, very hot for me. And I wanted to do a kind of Bogart and Bacall sort of vibe, and so it was a great place to sort of set that. And so it was about a community who were doing the Hour, which was a new sort of new show, one-hour new show.
It would be interesting in a time of fake news to replay the Hour. Do you know what I mean? So in a way, it was very much about the relationship between politics and
the way that the media speaks of
newsrooms.
I'd love to do another sort of. I'd love to see the 70s actually. I mean, that's sort of the joy of something that could build and grow in that way. But yeah, I mean, they're amazing environments, because also, as we know, as we're seeing every day now in the press, we know that these institutions are brilliant places to hide and conceal and share open secrets, and so and where else to do better to do them is in transparently in places where you're meant to be digging up the dirt. So yeah, they're great environments for thriller.
I would love to know about the way in which we tell stories, or we get information in thrillers, particularly in thrillers perhaps. Because there's a danger, isn't there, with kind of exposition. There's a difficulty with kind of setting up the frame of whatever the narrative drive is, and then the resolution. So this scene, which was beautiful, it was elegantly done, is the reveal scene, effectively. So tell me a little bit about approaching those. Are they they're important to get right, aren't they? Because if they're...
Yeah, I mean, I think often you're looking for strong... I mean, I always start from the emotional, psychological point of view. And then, I think, all writing is rewriting. So I may do a throw of the clay that is purely that emotional drive of somebody saying, I can't believe you've betrayed me. I've known you ever since I was a boy. How could you do that? I trusted you, sort of. But then you have a script editor saying, don't forget you've got to mention that,
right.
he's got, you were the one that killed his wife, and
right.
And so you build things in layers. So I think there is a there is the constructive part which you work on, and you have people around you just reminding you and giving you notes. But also I just tend to root my way through psychologically. So, for example, at the moment, I've just finished up on a movie which is about a female serial killer and her relationship with a female psychologist, and it's a story of revenge. And that has actually the hardest thing has been to hold on to why she's done it, because we keep shifting. And as soon as you lose why she's done it, then you lose. It actually really starts to fall apart as a story, and you realise how important that psychological. Sort of silence of the lambs moment is, that two characters come together and mutually hold this truth together, and that you're waiting to get to that kind of moment in it. It'll become the kind of emotional thriller navigational point, and as a writer you hold on to that. I mean, Arthur Miller always talked about writing, he used to write in one line what his plays were about and stick it on his computer, and his computer is typewriter, dream on. And I think when you're with a thriller, you're always driving, and as a writer, I think you're always, I knew that was going to be a great final scene, because these were brilliant, mainly because these actors were so good, and actually that's the one thing when you're writing a series, you often haven't written the last episode, so you're often cutting your cloth and going, God, she's brilliant, he's terrible, I'm definitely bringing his part down, she's brilliant, I'm going to write more for her, and, so you're often shaping as you watch it, and so you're seeing how actors play as well, and so often that can be a very inspiring way to embed that you can trust a good actor can embed exposition. Yes. But it's a balance. I always just see it as a sort of psychological. You're always just holding on to the psychological truth, really.
Do you get involved in casting, or do you have an idea when you're setting out writing something who you'd like to? I mean, pretty much everything we've seen today, it's all in the casting. It's very much so. You've had some amazing Britain's finest, really, in your work. So do you have a sense of that? Do you often can you nudge the casting agent?
Oh,
Is that
yeah,
what you think?
no, I'm
Yeah.
really. I mean, I'm one part of, but no, I think that's one of the things that becomes more and more important as you go on. I mean, we're in this extraordinary time because every actor is busy, and is signed up to 25 million zillion episodes with Marvel, and so I'm not bitter, but. But
I mean, I just pause you there. Is that really that drain is really having an effect on kind of British writers, British writing and casting?
Yeah. I mean, I don't know. I don't think it's stopping us writing, and I think you quote that. I live with an actor. He'll be going, no, I'm not. I think there are loads of actors who aren't, but yeah, it's a very, very busy marketplace at the moment. So. In terms of your casting, yes, absolutely. I mean, particularly as well because television is still a writer's medium. Although there are incredible directors that are coming to it, it's a writer's medium, and so your casting is absolutely important because directors used to come on relatively late on television, and so you've really evolved the material by the time they've come on. So, so the casting is absolutely essential. Yeah.
So this might be an impossible question to answer, but do you have a kind of, when you're approaching a project, you've got a brand new idea, walk us through it. What do you do first, and then next? What comes? Do you have a kind of, is there normally something you?
Well, I've got a new idea actually that I'm just about to try and put out there, and I've got a new idea, and it's literally a central character of a woman who you suddenly realise this very menial job that she does every day has huge political implications, and that's my starting point at the moment, and it can start with something very tiny. So I often start with a character who is facing a very, very big moral dilemma. So it can be a sister who suddenly realises, her sister and her best friend has betrayed her, and so she must go out and re-traffic herself to bring her back, or a woman who goes back and reconnects with somebody she thought she'd lost, and then she discovers this man is the devil himself, he's a paedophile, or so I start incredibly simply, really. So that's basically how I start. But that's one gig, but the other version is someone says there's an amazing book. What do you think? And I don't really approach that any different. But fortunately, I just get given something. So in fact, I have just written another thriller based on a new novel coming out called Tangerine, which is set in 1950s Morocco with the fall of Tangier, and that's a kind of single white female of two women in their 50s, and one tries to destroy the other, and that just jumped off the page, and I was just like, oh my god, this is amazing. So that's a very different way of diving in, because you're sort of basically, you're a tourist. It's like going, wow, great. Oh, God, yeah, I'll go and see that. I'll take this. I'll do. So it's a very different journey. Whereas when you're motivating yourself, it sort of starts in a more internal way.
And is your next thing research? Are you like, right now I need to go and find out everything, or do you start writing, or do you?
That's the funny thing, because after I did sex traffic, I used to be saying, we'd love you to come to Brussels and talk to, the sex trafficking conference of da-da-da, and I think, shit, yeah, I'd love to come, that'd be great. And I think, fuck, I really actually don't know that much beyond, the little bits of so actually I think, I do read a lot, and I do, but someone, I remember 3 years ago, someone said, you really do need to go to Afghanistan for that, and I was like, I really don't. It's really not going to. So I'm actually basically a coward. I'm a sort of armchair researcher. But yeah, I do. It's really, really important to me. And I'm very inspired by it. But I forget it. I mean, I couldn't tell you the names of any of those characters, for example. I literally forget, because it's almost like my brain just won't hold on to it. I've got to let it go. But for that moment, it's the thing I'm most passionate about, or it's the story I'm most passionate about. And so we are in this incredible age as well, where you can look up, read, talk to anybody in a day.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then, so in terms of, say, the series you're talking about, The Hour, that you haven't written the end yet as you're writing it. So do you have a kind of, are you one that mocks up the Bible and then you're kind of fleshing it out as it's growing? Is that sort of
Yeah,
process?
It varies. Every story is very different. The show I've just written is very, very, it's a kind of personal, very emotional, about marriage and love and divorce, and so that was very, very difficult to ask anyone else to come on board, whereas the show that I'm going to do after this is about the life of Cleopatra. And so that's a very, there is so much incredible story in that you can literally go, okay, episode 2, episode 3, episode 4, and so that is very much you will beat that out. But it really depends. I mean, certainly with that story, I knew where it was going to go, and I have sort of broad brushstrokes. And I watch a lot, so I'll often go and look at those great movies that I kind of adore and love and go, okay, that's you. How do they do that? Okay, that's interesting.
Yes.
So I draw on a lot, yeah.
Is there a kind of, as obviously we're a movie house and we're showing a thriller season, and I horribly asked the other guys in the last panel if they had a favourite thriller or something that they often went to, or that had a kind of character that they felt anchored by. But do you have like a favourite kind of a go-to film or a go-to type of film? Or
I mean, I really do love Hitchcock, so I do, yeah, and I do, and I think the weirdness of Hitchcock as well, and the kind of weirdness of Rear Window, or you can go through the whole gamut, and they are just odd films. They're emotionally odd films, as well as being absolutely compelling, and they are, the way they're constructed, as we know, they're very unsettling. I mean, I'm a big sucker for those kind of sort of late 80s jagged, edge sort of Basic Instinct schlock. I mean, I absolutely love that stuff.
We're showing a few of them here.
Yeah, well, I kind of love that stuff because it's so simplistic and it's so clear, and it's just great when you go, look at the typewriter, but they are so hard to construct those, and so it is that thing where you say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry it's such a long letter, I didn't have time to write a short one. And that's what I love about those movies, is you go, God, they look like nothing actually, but they're so well constructed. So, so I put a Jagged Edge up there. I mean, everything from Rear Window to Jagged Edge, probably.
Yeah, great. So, I think our thrilling mystery has been resolved, so I'm told. But before I do the reveal, we'll cue the next clip. So, the last show we're going to look at is The Magnificent River. Interesting hook between Hitchcock and this, because obviously this is deeply in the psychological realm. It takes the unreliable witness to a whole nother level. So if you want to tell us a little bit about...
Yeah, I mean, River came from me saying to producer Jane Featherstone, who I work with a lot, it's me saying, I want to do a story about a detective who's going mad, and I want him to see manifestations of that madness. They're not ghosts. I don't believe in the afterlife, and so that was the starting point. And so I wanted to play with that trick. And I really loved Anthony Minghella's work, and I loved Truly Madly Deeply, and I loved, I love films with ghosts, even though not the kind of kind, but the psychological kind, and I love the kind of simplicity of Truly Madly Deeply as a kind of metaphor for grief, and really that's what River was. It's a homage, of anything, to Minghella, and going, it's about grief, and how does grief manifest itself in the context of a cop show when you have to solve a crime.
Right, perfect. Thank you so much for coming, and coming back, because you were here on the stage last night, so thank you. So, I don't know if I'm allowed to swear, but I'll bleep myself. So I read a line that you said, Abby, about this, which is, how do you F up the logic of a cop show? So tell us a little bit about that, about this. This is a kind of procedural, but with an absolute difference, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, cop shows, I'll never do them again because they are so hard, because we've seen them done again and again and again. And so I think what was amazing with having someone like Stellan on board is that you have this incredible kind of force that will take you on the journey, that won't just be that will cover you actually when you have to go to the mortuary and look at the dead body, and when you have to go, call Sykes, and you have to, check number plates and do all of that kind of archetypal stuff and stand around looking moody in the distance. Stellan can do that above and beyond, and so I think it was always really much more a show about a man coming to terms with the death of his partner and his colleague, and then what you realise is it's also a man who's haunted by this death and is trying to find an answer to this death. So that's where the cop show lies, and I think the cop show kind of, actually, if you start to try and make a nod to the traditions of that, it's very, very hard. And so for me, it was always, the driving force was always the emotional relationship of a man with this woman who was no longer alive, but also a man who was actually this had triggered another episode which he had experienced before, and so it's really about a man who's having to go back into his own psychosis and recognise it and learn to live with it, and then discover that a community around him who love him will also help him live with it too. And so it was really important as well for me, a piece about mental health, and I wanted to talk about if you're someone who talks out loud, and I am someone who talks out loud, and I say that with no cuteness. I talk out loud. It's just how I survive every day. And so for me, talking in that way and communicating in that way is something that's so normal. And so that was why I wanted to, that's why I wanted to do that in a cop show, really, in a sort of traditional form. Because again, I was hoping people would come and watch it. Because if I said it was a cop show, then maybe people would watch it. And if I said it's a drama about mental health, then you might have turned over, you know, so...
And how was this idea presented to you, Stellan? How did it come to you? And
Well, not as eloquent as now. She just sent the script. I understand it now.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. No, I got 60 pages of the first episode, and then I met, and I usually turn down police films and police series because I'm really bad at saying, download the CCTV footage, that kind of stuff. And I actually asked you to take away every police line from me and give it to someone else. So poor Leslie Manville had a tough time on this one.
And you look really lazy.
And I look really lazy, and I sit and brood a little instead of look interesting. No, but it was such a remarkable. Since I'm not interested in the procedural side of it more than as a skeleton on which you put meat, there was so much meat on this that you never saw the skeleton, and I was very happy with that. But it's also, it was a kind of writing that you rarely see, because with that brain, it's every character was made with compassion. There's not one little character in this series that is just sort of lazily written, or that is just evil or just bad. Every character has full human values, and that is amazing. And then since it was such an internal story, some people said, but how are you going to do the ghosts? Are they going to be can you see through them? Or will it go, ooh, strange sounds and stuff? But of course, you present them as real people, because that's the only, that's the point with this material. And then we met, and I said yes. I think that was it.
you were talking about casting earlier and about how important that is in your work and how involved. Did you say Stellan for this?
Yeah, definitely. I mean,
Yeah.
we had Jane. I mean, it was Jane. Jane was. We were sort of. When we were developing it, we were kind of doing dream casting, and Stellan's name came up, and I was like, he's a film star. Anyway, back to Chris Eccleston.
He would have been fine.
Also good.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's where it came about, really, was... I really like Chris Eccleston. He's great. I'm really sorry, Chris Eccleston. I loved you. I thought you were brilliant as Doctor Who. You should have definitely carried on longer. Yeah, I think it was that. And then when we sort of had the script, it was Jane said, come on, let's do it. Let's just send it to him. And you replied within a couple of days. It was amazing. And then we went out to see Stellan in Stockholm, and it was just an amazing fit. And I think it is. You need actor. You know, I jokingly say he's a film actor, and I mean that I think there is some kind of chemical thing with film actors, and I think Stellan absolutely has it in spades. And it's just huge interior world. And so I kept, actually, more than anything with River, I kept on trying to take away lines because there was he was so good at delivering. I mean, I hate it because he's sitting here and.
No, I like it.
You enjoy it. You keep, but you know, he was okay.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it was brilliant from that point of view, and also I just knew that he could carry this very, very traumatized man, and that was the point. It was meant to be someone very traumatized, and it was meant to be about. It's actually about vulnerability. The whole series is about vulnerability. Really.
Yeah. There's this gorgeous bit in the beginning, in the first episode, where I've still got the song in my head, but they're singing, they puts the radio on, and I Love to Love is on, and then Nicola Walker's being very un-Nicola Walker, because she's like all preppy and happy and singing alongy, and she's kind of poking you, and this is really strange as the opening of a sort of cop show, and obviously the buddies in the car, and you're like, cops never go on like this. What's going on? So there's something about your chemistry and how she plays off you. So what was that like working with her, and how did you?
Yeah, that was lovely. I mean, I'll get to that. I just wanted to say about the film thing you said, because film is very different from television, because in television it's more like theater. It's the text carries the story much more.
Right.
Which means that because you're supposed to be able to see it and cook at the same time, which means that the explanation has to come in the lines, and that's why I have done so little television.
Right.
But cinema is something else, because that is, and cinema acting is something else, because all the acting is between the lines. You just drop the line, and then they see what you think. So in that sense, it's that's the difference between film and television from an acting point of view. But Nicola Walker, so she usually is not as gay or happy as she is when she's dead.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sort of
She's a very happy.
liberates you, doesn't
Yes,
it?
exactly.
No, it was fantastic. To me, it is as much as it is about a troubled man. It's just as much about a love story, and that's why I thought we should not continue in a second season, because it's a beautiful 6-hour love story, and she made it just happen. Yeah.
I was going to ask that about whether the second. So it didn't go to second series, did it?
I think it became apparent. I mean, genuinely, I think it became apparent to us that it was sort of, that was the story. I mean, it would have been lovely but it was hard. I mean, one of the things that was interesting, I think, for Nicola, and I've subsequently gone on to work with Nicola on The Split, the new show, and part of the reason why, she's a brilliant actress, but part of the reason for that was because Stellan and her had amazing chemistry, but Stellan was the only one who could see her. And that's really, really hard for an actor to play day in and day out. Being ignored. I mean, that's, for an actor, my God, it's so really hard. But, just really, really hard. I mean, you're not like that, but so very, really hard. And I think there was just something beautiful and fragile and genuinely really great chemistry. And it's interesting to hear you say that about film. You're absolutely right, actually. It is, and you get hungry for that again, actually.
Yeah, but I slash lines all the time, throw them out. As you noticed, it's not because they're bad.
No,
it's just because
you just don't need them.
No.
Yeah, that's a longer conversation, because that's also about money on the screen, isn't it? How much money
that's
you've got on each shot, which is a lot more in film. But anyway, another conversation, another time. I think I watched them as a punter, actually. I mean, invariably I sit there going, I think you do deconstruct. I think it's probably like being an actor. But I think if it's compelling and interesting enough. I mean, I've seen a series that I found completely compelling, and often it's to do with worlds. So, for example, I really loved The Night Of. Even though I think it's not perfect, I just thought the world was just extraordinary and beautiful and, amazing to see America done in that way. So yeah, I actually try and watch television. When I watch television, I try and watch it as an audience, because I love it. But I don't know, what about you?
Yeah, I watch everything that I'm not in as an audience. But finding out who did it is usually the least interesting thing, if it's something good. I mean, you're interested in why and what happens with the people in the story. It's far more interesting to me.
Well, I mean, I think it can really vary, but I get paid. I should really emphasize that point to everybody. It's a big motivator that when you get paid, someone says, will you deliver at that time? And you have to deliver. So I tend to, I do things very differently. For example, I employ a lot more people to help me now. So I employ a researcher, I employ someone who breaks down books for me, and I've been amazed how much quicker I can then write.
Like the Damien Hirst of writing.
And basically, I get someone else to do all the writing, that thing called writing. Do you do the words on the page? But so it can vary. But normally, I do a picture. I'll do a verbal pitch. I'll say, let me go away and write the outline. I'll go away and write the outline. I might back that backwards and forwards. I try and work with people who I love, who are champions of me, who say nice things to me in the room before I take it out to people who say horrible things, so I get my confidence up. And once I've done that, I normally go to script quite quickly. But what I do, and I don't say this because it takes me too long. I do too many drafts.
because I'm constantly going, it's all right, I'll do it the next time. It'll be better the next time. So I have to keep going and going and going until somebody basically stops me.
When you gave me those 60 pages, did you know who the killer was?
No, I didn't, and
No.
I changed that halfway through.
Yeah, you did.
Yeah, I'd always change that. I mean, I know a vague ending, but not.
Do you remember what you thought it was going to be the first time that you changed?
I think it was not going to be him. You can still download it on Netflix.
Yeah, exactly. You can watch it on Netflix.
Could have been the other him.
Okay. Okay. And Stellan, what about preparing for a role? Say, preparing for something like River, do you have like a process, or you just show up on set and go, I'm ready?
No, not much. I mean, I'm not the American kind of actor. I'm not a method actor. I work hard on figuring out what does the film need from me to work. And then I get a frame, and then I can be free within that frame.
Give us an example.
Well, it's what kind of acting would be counterproductive? So you have to eliminate that. That would not work for the story, for the film, for anything. But everything else is there, is free.
Okay.
I'm not the kind of actor who says to the director, no, my character wouldn't do that. Because he might. My character might be much richer than I ever could imagine. So let's try it. It's a lot of it happens in that sense in front of the camera, but I've thought about it a lot before. But I don't restrict what I'm doing in front of the camera by what I've decided before.
Are you always on set, Abby?
God, no.
Not never. You're never.
No, I go on for it. No, I do. I go on for a bit, but honestly, it's really boring. Whereas, I mean, it's not that. Because your work is done, and I do always joke that I talk to the catering staff. I really do talk to the catering staff. Yeah, I mean, I do go on. I do go on because I like to see it up. But actually, the thing I love is the rushes at the end of the day. That's my joy, really. And you don't have to get out of your pajamas then. But
No, it's not anymore. No.
But yeah, I do go on. I go in and I do the kind of coming in and going, brilliant. You're amazing. Yeah. And if it's an amazing location, I'll go. I'm really trying to digging my way out the hole. And of course, I'm there all the time. It's really important if I'm a producer. But yeah,
Somewhere exotic.
I mean, Stellan, you can probably answer this as well with me, actually, because I think, because I came from a theatre background where the writer is king, it was a great place for me to really go, okay, I know what my voice is. I think notes are essential. I think of playwrights as artists. I don't think of television writers as artists. I think of it as a job. And I think of it as, I don't own the script. I literally don't own the script. I sell the script. And so it's not my, so I have to constantly take people's notes and listen and engage and fight for that thing. And I really, really, really genuinely mean it when I enjoy notes. But what I've just learned is if I don't like the note, I'll go, brilliant, no, I love it, and I won't do it. It's really, really simple. And it's the trick that everybody needs to, because basically, and I say that because people just need to be heard. Now, if it's an important note, someone will come back and say, you didn't do my note, and you can then argue it. But if they don't come back, then it wasn't an important enough note, and it gets them off your back. And most of the time, what you need to do is, you need to work out who's the brightest person in the room. So, for example, I have done something recently where I realised that new assistant is brighter than anybody else, and her notes are really good. So I will always make out and think she's actually got the good note. Or certain subjects have, certain projects have certain tastes. You think, well, I know their taste and this will suit that. But I like notes, and I'm not frightened of them, because if I don't like them, I just don't do them. But what I do is I try and resolve something else. So it's a sleight of hand. So I'll go, I've just had a note on a series where we thought it was about to get greenlit, and they've gone, yeah, really love it, we need one more important scene. It's taken me a week because I didn't know how to do this scene. And I realised because it was a much, much bigger problem than this one scene. And so I then did a much bigger, flashier thing over here, and I didn't make any difference to that scene that was wanted, and everyone's gone, great. So that's what you do. You just have to. I think what's very difficult is as soon as you get notes, it gets defensive. It's not. Notes are part. How lucky are we if you get paid, and someone says, I've engaged with your work and I've got some thoughts on it. Why would I be defensive? You've got to keep yourself really open to it, and it's really painful. But I would say that's important, and I think it's probably as an actor, it's not dissimilar, because you get given note. You have to keep yourself quite open to that.
Well, it happens that the director says something,
Yeah.
but the good ones doesn't say much.
Yeah.
But of course, it's what I get is I get the notes from my fellow actors, because how they act is a note to me, and makes me act differently. What I love about filmmaking is that it's collaborative. The notes, what you have to, when you, I mean, I've said things about your scripts as well, and that is from my point of view. But I'm the kind of guy that I just put all the ideas on the floor because they come fast, and then pick what you want. But you get notes that come from really afraid people very often in the business, whether you deal with a big Hollywood studio or a network, because there's a lot of people that it's their job to come with notes, and they have to invent notes sometimes, and they're so afraid of everything. They're afraid of losing their job. They're afraid of doing something that hasn't been done before. So especially when you work with material like this, you can expect that there are a lot of people that are dead scared because it doesn't look like anything else. They don't know how to sell it. They don't know how to handle the material, and they don't know what notes to come with. But
You're right. I mean, and also, I mean, when the notes start to come from actors, it's also really worth listening because they're the keepers of the character. You know, I did a play and I kept on seeing this actor and she said, "I really just want to have a quick word with you." And I'd be like, "Yeah, in a minute, thanks." And then she went on, and eventually she said, "You're talking about my relationship with my mother." I went, "Yeah." And she said, "You killed her in episode 1." And I was like, "Did I?" And she had literally picked, you know, it's those actors who they're the barometer of your, you know, they're the keeper of the character. So I listened to that, but I don't mean to be glib because I think notes are very, very painful, and they're really hard because also. But I think when you close down, it's just fear, and I think if you keep saying writing is rewriting, then it's helpful because I always keep it. It's never complete. And it's never perfect. I look at that and I go, "Oh, terrible line." You know, I'm watching it with you and I want to go, "Sorry about that. It's going to be much funnier next time." It's just a very natural part of writing. But so I think when you start to close down is when you stop. It's not good for the work. So I think just try and keep yourself as open as possible. But it is very, very hard. And don't do the notes you don't like. I don't work in my home anymore. Do you have an office out?
I have an office.
Do you?
What
do you do
pretend to work there.
Do you sit and do Lear on your own?
Yeah.
That's an image I'm not going to get out of my head. Do you know what? At the moment, I have an office, but I don't know why. I'm not using it. So you'll find me in every coffee shop across North London at the moment. I don't know what it is, but I have just bought a new office, so I'm about to move to a new office. But yeah, I do the usual. I mean, I get up, I drink a lot of coffee, I kiss goodbye to my kids, and then I go and work, and I watch a lot of Netflix when I fall asleep a lot. That's always a good part of my day. I realise power napping is incredibly important. It's underrated amongst writers. And Green and Black's chocolate, always very good. But yeah, the main thing is it's my job. You know, it's my job. And so it's amazing. You just have to push your way through. And there are days when I definitely have wobbly periods of a couple of weeks where I think I cannot do any more internet shopping or, convince myself this is research when in fact I'm out with a girlfriend. So, but I just basically get up every day and I'm very, there's a reason why you work with great actors. There's a reason why you work with great producers, because they motivate you. And so often it's because you're always working to get somewhere. You know, I'm on a movie. I've been on it for a couple of years now, and wonderful producer said, "Just do me one more draft." Of course, I'm going to do one more draft because we might get there. So it's often the kick of getting your work made, and I'm sure it's the same as an actor. You know, why do you go and do a £1 million movie? You know, when which is costing you, because you need to get back to that place. And so I would say for me, writing is the place I still the kind of demons in my mind, and I can be in the most incredible emotional flux, and it's still the place where I can sit and everything calms. So I feel that's the lucky thing, but it's not always easy, and I think I'd want to punch me in the face if I said,
It's really easy. I start at 7. I write. I normally do about 50 pages, and then I don't. I have days where are disastrous, and I'm always late on a deadline as well. If that makes you feel any better, I'm always late on a deadline.
Is it true that Jane Featherstone had a box in the office where she locked you in?
She did, actually. It was horrific. And do you know what's so sad? Do you know what's so sort of Pavlovian about it is I didn't realise for 3 months. I was like, so great the way she's given me this office. It's brilliant. And it's so great she keeps coming in to see me. And then I realised when I'd go out for a coffee, I'd suddenly realise that a runner was coming with me, and I'd be like, what are you doing? And they were like, no, we'll get your own coffee. Stay in the room. Stay in the room. Yeah, it took me months to realise that. But yeah, she did lock me in. I'll never do that again. Hence, I just bought an office down the road from her. Yeah, I've never thought about it, really. Well, I suppose it's character that will always drive home for me, and character carries story, so it's the same thing, really. I think if I wrap up a character, then I wrap up the story, but I don't always want to wrap up the story. Actually, someone just said, well, would you like to have done a second series of River? Well, in a way, those characters live on. They do live on in you, so you don't always neatly wrap them up. I'm sure, for me, River's still wandering around London somewhere, and so you don't completely... You still think of stories and generate stories for them. So I think they kind of unite for me. It's not one without the other, if that makes sense.
And Stellan, so that was kind of your first chunky bit of TV. Would you go back again? Would you go? Okay.
I'm actually going to do a small HBO thing, 5 episodes.
Okay.
Yeah.
It won't be as good as mine.
It will not be as good. But it's a friend of mine directing it, and it is good writing. But if I ever get anything like River again, I'll do it.
Yeah.
But I'm reluctant to sort of get into the treadmill of spitting out meaningless shit every week.
It is easy.
And I mean that in a nice way.
Yeah. Well, on that note, I just want to thank you both, because I do think that River, to me, transformed what I thought the TV thriller could do. I think it took it into a whole other direction, and it was deeply meaningful. So thank you both, and thank you both for taking some time with us today.